name is Niara Griffith. I'm in speech 1311-372, and this is my speech about deforestation in the Amazon rainforest. Brazil, Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, French Guyana, Peru, Suriname, and Venezuela. These are all countries in South America, but they also house parts of the Amazon rainforest. There are about 2,500 distinct species of animals, including reptiles, mammals, amphibians, and birds in this rainforest. There were tons of ancient settlements and earthworks, similar to Machu Picchu in Peru, as well as modern indigenous groups like the Caripuna, who live in the Brazilian state of Rondônia. In fact, in an interview with El Tecolote, Adriano Caripuna said that the forest is being threatened. Deforestation not only antagonizes communities living in the Amazon rainforest, but also the animals that live there and the plant life that lives there. It threatens biodiversity and life in South America as we know it. Today we'll be talking about how deforestation contributes to climate change, global warming, how it removes safe and healthy habitats, and how it removes a very strong part of Black DNA culture. Point 1. Deforestation is one of the biggest contributors to climate change and global warming. Deforestation, the process of removing trees from a forest ecosystem, is prevalent in the world today. Not all deforestation comes from corporations and capitalist removal of trees, but some deforestation comes from forest fires, and some intentionally set fires for regrowth in forests. So not all deforestation is necessarily bad. Deforestation is bad when it's not clear by people who actually live in that area, people who have jurisdiction over that area, or when it's done for financial/economic reasons. When we look at how trees interact with the environment, trees produce oxygen, which is needed for human survival. So when we remove trees from places that they are entitled to exist, we are lessening the amount of oxygen that is readily available to us. Now, trees contribute to the ozone layer as well, seeing as they take in carbon dioxide. If we look at this graphic here, we can see how much carbon density there is in the Amazon. Deforestation became prevalent around 21 to 22. So the darker green on this infographic shows the rise in how much deforestation there's been and how that's contributed to the ozone layer's deconstruction. When we remove trees, we're taking away something that sucks up the carbon dioxide in our atmospheres. When we have tears in the ozone layer, it is contributed to by the lack of trees soaking in that carbon dioxide. Looking at this issue globally, it happens not only in the Amazon, but also in Congo, Sweden, and Canada, to name a few other countries with dense forests. In an article published by the National Resources Defense Council, they said that deforestation contributes to global warming. It's the second largest source of carbon emissions. As I said earlier, trees suck up carbon dioxide, but when they are cut down, they release a lot of that carbon dioxide, and it's all at once. It tears holes in the ozone layer, which contributes to global warming a lot. That brings us to our next point. Deforestation eradicates safe and healthy habitats for whole ecosystems of animals. Back to our original point. Look at this forest. Look how green it is. How can we not want to protect that? So it gives life. Why would we want to take that away? But yes, back to the animals. Deforestation, especially in soil-rich areas, would have a very negative impact on ecological communities there. Earlier, I said there were about 2,500 distinct species of animals. Speaking specifically, there are about 427 mammal species, 1,300 different types of birds, 378 reptile species, and over 400 different amphibian species. And even at this high number, new discoveries are still being made. There's new beetles being discovered in the Amazon, like literally right now as we speak. The Amazon Conservation Group that works out of Peru and Bolivia finds this not only to be inspiring, but worth protecting. They work with local governments, landowners, and indigenous communities in national parks in Peru and Bolivia to help protect the rainforest from these animals. Animals like this: capybara, poison tree dart frog, the jaguarundi, the green anaconda, which is the largest snake in the world. Dealing with law specifically, Timothy Killeen at Manga Bay explains how Brazil, Colombia, Guyana, Suriname, and Peru have had parts of their constitution directly in respect to the environment. Ecuador and Peru did as well, but those parts are more open to interpretation than the others. It says, and I quote, Brazil's 1988 constitution was radically different. It includes 10 articles that address nature conservation and environmental management, which is a thematic focus that is surpassed only by provisions detailing the federal governance structure. Peru's 1993 constitution is less specific, but it identifies environmental management as well as the maintaining of the rainforest and the animals within it. Writers Paulina Vaca and Heather J. Johnson at the National Geographic say there are thousands of species being endangered by deforestation in the Amazon today. This is dangerous not only because of the dangers of deforestation, but because biodiversity drives the ecosystem there. Animals from the 4 major kingdoms, as shown here, are at risk of disappearing because they won't have an environment that suits their needs anymore. This is why we need to take a stronger stance against deforestation. Now for our final point. Deforestation threatens Latina culture as we know it. Seeing as in the Amazon is in South America, and the majority of it, this part right here, is all in Brazil, it should go without saying that deforestation would also take away a lot of Latina culture. As I mentioned, there are indigenous groups that live in the Amazon, not just animals and plants. Research from Brazilian archaeologist Eduardo Goes Neves says that this area was densely populated with about 8 to 10 million people before colonization. In fact, it was likely more since illnesses like smallpox and the common cold had not yet come to South America. Now, Brazil was colonized by Portugal, while the rest of South America was taken by Spain, hence Latin, not Hispanic. This means that culture is very much relative and defined by people in that area, even more so because of the impact they've had on the Amazon and vice versa. According to the World Resource Initiative, there are about 385 different people groups that are supposedly supported by the government's laws about indigenous land and conservation, but national laws often favor companies over indigenous communities. This study talks about the comprehensive legal assessment of 6 Amazonian countries, including the ones shown here. Although these countries have all had granted legal protections to communities, these lands are insufficient, and most indigenous people are still vulnerable to mining. The search is a statement that, according to the research, reading through Constitution, talking to government officials and actual indigenous people, the government does not seem to care about protecting the rights of these indigenous communities. Deforestation would rid these people of their environment and communities, rid them of their resources, and how they interact with the world around them. It would destroy parts of Latin culture that already aren't given attention and are mystified more than they are respected. Deforestation is not good for the environment, nor is it good for the people and animals in those forests. It treats them as inconsequential. The question I posed earlier as to who is responsible to protecting the Amazon stands to be answered now. We all have to protect the Amazon rainforest. If it falls and we let our greed, consumption, and selfishness take over one of the greatest ecosystems, what does that say about us? That we would rather have resources than lush, vibrant forests? We would rather have economic abundance than people's safety and ensured life? We would rather have paper than trees for these animals to take shelter under? And sure, trees are a renewable resource, but with the time it takes for them to grow enough to be reharvested, we should be using other resources that wouldn't be the loss of 9 countries' livelihoods. This is why we need to stop deforestation. Thank you.